Good day. As president of SBMF, Brazilian Society of Pharmaceutical Medicine, I'm very proud to opening such a relevant meeting on the status of the COVID-19 pandemic in Brazil. SBMF brings together doctors and other health professionals who work in the pharmaceutical industry in Brazil and represents IFAPP in our territory. SBMF completes 50 years of existence in 2021 and continues with the same pillars since the time of its foundation. Clinical research is our main pillar, and exactly at this time of health crisis, it seems that it has become a pillar of everyone around the world. The pharmaceutical industry has invested more than $7 billion worldwide this year in the development of vaccines, and pharma industry doctors have a crucial job to ensure that the vaccines meet the expectations of the population. Brazil is participating in multi-center studies on at least 4 different vaccines, and we are all together with the authorities, researchers, and CROs dedicated full-time to achieve our goals. I am very grateful to Dr. Honório Silva, President of IFAPP, who gave us this opportunity, and to Dr. Eduardo Motti, Director of SBMF, and infectologist who organized this meeting. I wish everyone an excellent event.
Okay. So thank you very much, Hélio, and we are honored to have all the audience here and to have a distinguished set of panelists today with us. We'll start with Dr. Celso Granato. Celso is an associate professor of infectious disease at Escola Paulista de Medicina, a leading medical school in Brazil, and he's also the clinical director of Fleury Group, distinguished clinical laboratory in Sao Paulo. So Celso, thank you very much for being with us, and the microphone is yours.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I start by thanking Eduardo Motti and Dr. Romano and everyone that organized this meeting. It's an honor for me to participate and to present you some data of the epidemic in Brazil. If you may have the first slide, please. As you may know, we started the epidemic in Brazil at the end of February. We have kind of a late start, but nowadays we're in the middle of what some people call second wave. It's debated if we should call second wave or just a rebound of the first wave, but this is not so important. And the next slide, please. I'm sure everyone knows a little bit about Brazil, but just to give you a closer idea, this is the map of Brazil, and we put here inside the comparisons in terms of the area. So where we live in São Paulo state, like United Kingdom, and then Amazonia is like Mongolia and Angola. So Brazil is really a big country. Here is Italy. Many of you are Italians, so in northeast Brazil, it's like the state of Maranhão. Right? And Brazil has an area of about 8,500,000 square kilometers. And if you compare with Alaska, with the United States, except from Alaska, we are a little bigger than US, a little smaller than Canada. And Brazil has a total population of around 210 million inhabitants. But most important than that is that we have a population with high heterogeneity. So it's like you have here, for example, Germany and Venezuela. So it's completely different if you compare Southeast Brazil and South Brazil with Amazonia and Northeastern Brazil. This has a huge impact in terms of all infectious diseases, for example. So just to give you, is one of the difficulties we have in dealing with infectious diseases in our country. So we started by telling you about the beginnings of epidemics, the study we participate, and then the spread of the disease in the country. And then lastly, the situation of the city of Sao Paulo. Next slide, please. We made a study that was coordinated by Professor Esther Sabino from the University of Sao Paulo. We were able to collect about 26,000 samples and tested by RT-PCR. About 8,000 samples, about 29% were positive. And when we made the sequencing of these viruses, we could find 427 new genomes, which were not described until this time. We could cover about 75% of the country, 85 municipalities in 18 federal states. Brazil has 27 federal states. We were able to find samples from 18 federal samples. One important information is that the lag between the first case report and sample collection was between 4.5 and 6 days. So these were very recent samples. On the right side of this image, you can see how the spread of the infection was. You know, São Paulo and Rio de Janeiro were the first big cities to be affected by the epidemic, since we are cities where the airports are very busy. We receive many business tourists and also tourists as normal tourists. And then there was a spread to northeast and then to northern Brazil. So this is how we could see and detect the spread of Brazil, starting from the biggest cities in the southeast. Next slide, please. The methodology used by looking at the samples was a mobility-driven transmission model by the cellular phone and virus sequencing by traditional laboratory methods and NGS. We started by doing, as everyone, from non-pharmaceutical interventions, and this measure reduced the reproduction number from greater than 3. Actually, when it started, we have a little above 3. One person infected more than 3 others. And then with these non-pharmaceutical interventions, we were able to reduce to below 1 in Sao Paulo and maybe 1.6 in Rio. But these measures lasted only a few weeks. We are not able to keep these non-pharmaceutical interventions for longer than about 4 or 5 weeks. And then we got over 1.3, and that's where we are right now, about 1.3 RO. We could find, as I told you, 427 new genomes, and we could detect more than 100 international virus introductions, mostly from Europe and from the States and a little bit from Asia, only between 22 February and March 11. Yeah? Initially, we have a spread that was locally and only within state borders. Then there was a restriction of the air flight inside Brazil. But people, if people want to go to Amazonia or to northeast Brazil, you are obliged to go by plane. There is no other alternative. And despite these air travel restrictions, virus is spread to major capital cities at long distances like Manaus, the capital city of Amazonia, Belém, and Fortaleza in the northeast. These 3 cities were the most deeply affected by the spread of the virus. Next slide, please. So you can see in this figure, this is Sao Paulo city. With these non-pharmaceutical interventions, there was a drop in this dissemination of the virus that lasted a few weeks, and then we are a little bit over 1. And Rio de Janeiro has already also a drop in this transmissibility, but they were a little bit 1 almost all the time. This is the number of cases in Brazil, parallel to the case of death, and this is Brazil with most affected areas. São Paulo state is here, most deeply affected. Amazonia, the second place, there is a study showing that about 60 to 66% of the population in Manaus have already been infected by COVID-19. And some states of the Northeast Brazil, like Ceará, is also deeply affected, but also Pernambuco and Bahia. Next slide, please. So, as I told you, we are, Sao Paulo, Brazil has a late first wave compared to the rest of the world. This is we are right now. And the dissemination of the virus was mostly concentrated in Southeast Brazil, areas close to Sao Paulo and Rio. And then after the restrictions of the air travel, except for long distances, the virus reached Manaus and Belém and other cities of Northeast Brazil. And so all the country was affected. Next slide, please. So this resulted in a study, Evolution Epidemic Spread of SARS-CoV-2 in Brazil. And this was published in the journal Science online on 23rd July of this year, giving you all the details you have about this virus and its spread in Brazil. Next slide, please. So, according to an idea that Professor Fernando Reinach had at the beginning of the epidemic in Brazil, he put together many researchers and people interested in this problem in Brazil, and we started doing at the beginning of May this study. This was a home sampling in order to monitor seroprevalence of SARS-CoV-2 infection among adults. It was a cross-sectional study using probabilistic sampling performed in Sao Paulo. We first made a pilot study at the beginning of May, and then every 1 or 2 months or so, we are doing a new collection of blood samples. And what I'm going to show you is the phase 4 that resulted that 26.2% of the adult population of the municipality of Sao Paulo have antibodies against SARS-CoV-2. But this percentage reaches 35.8% among people with less than 80 years of formal school education. As I told you, there is a huge heterogeneity, not only in Brazil, but even in a single city like Sao Paulo. This study was funded by the CEMEA Institute, by IBOP Intelligence, is a group of people that deal with sampling and public opinion, by the Grupo Fleury, it's a laboratory, and a group called All for Health, Todos pela Saúde, which is a collaboration between many entities organized by the Itaú, which is a bank here in Brazil. Next slide, please. So when this phase study was over, we collected samples between October 1st and October 10th. The city had about 240,000 cases, which are shown here by the red dots, and 13,000 deaths. The daily number of deaths are approximately 18, as you can show here in the blue dots. This is the situation when we finished the collection of blood samples on October 10th. Next slide, please. So, in order to estimate the seroprevalence in Sao Paulo, 1,129 blood samples were collected from people living in 152 censitary areas of the city. The city has about 1,400 censitary areas, so we choose randomly 152 censitary areas, and then at random too, we collected 8 samples by each censitary areas. Sao Paulo has a population of about 8,400,000 adults that live in Sao Paulo, and the city was divided into an area with a higher income, which is the central area of the map, and another with lower income, which is another peripheric area of the city. The samples are collected, as I told you, by probabilistic sampling in these census sectors, and then in a specific house. All adults living in this particular house were invited to participate at free will without any charge, and the confidentiality was assured in every step of the process. After filling a questionnaire, a blood sample was collected by venipuncture, it was not a finger stick. 2 different serological assays were used in order to verify the presence of antibodies against SARS-CoV-2. 2 classes of antibodies were searched for by chemiluminescence, is a Chinese test called Maglumi, and a second one, total immunoglobulin by electrochemiluminescence by Roche. This second test was introduced in studies in blood samples collected from July. Next slide, please. So, seroprevalence in São Paulo is estimated to be 26.2%, being lower in richest areas, 21.6%, and higher in the poorest areas, 30.4%. There is a statistically significant difference in these 2 areas of the city with a p-value of 0.01. When a comparison was made between results obtained in phase 3, which was about 2.5 months before this 4th phase, a significant elevation of 8.3% was observed. Phase 3, we have numbers of about 18%, and phase 4 is about 26.2%. So there is a rise in the percentage of people infected by SARS-CoV-2. Next slide, please. Then we try to make a correlation between level of formal education, race or skin color, and seroprevalence. People with less than 80 years of formal education have a seroprevalence of 2.2 times higher than individuals with university level, which were 35.8% versus 16%. The same was observed in relation to race or skin color. The seroprevalence was higher among dark-skinned people compared with whites, 31.6% versus 20.9%. As you can see in this picture here, there's all highly significant differences. And also, the more people you have living in the same house, the higher the risk of getting infected by SARS-CoV-2. Next slide, please. So the seroprevalence, represented by the red dots, estimated in this study gets higher in parallel with the number of confirmed cases with the blue dots, but with a lower level of increase. As the rate of seroconversion, seropositive that became seronegative, this is an important information for us, the seroreversion. Seroreversion is the possibility that people that is positive in cells and gets negative a long time. When you use 2 tests, this chance of getting negative after a positive test is very rare. Sometimes do that, but this is not very used. So we have to study more carefully to understand these differences between the estimated and the numbers that we found, but that deserves a careful evaluation to understand what is happening here. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, in the meantime, it was 73 days that separate phase 3, that's the last we had before, the 2029 in July, from phase 4, 1 to 10th October, a significant alteration change could be detected in seroprevalence among adults in the city of Sao Paulo. The seroprevalence goes from 17.9 to 26.2, an 8.3% rise. The seroprevalence in relation to a race, skin color, as the level of formal education maintain a statistically significant difference that we had already found in the 3rd phase. Among adults with up to 8 years of formal education, the seroprevalence is 5.8%. That means that 1 out of 3 people in the city of Sao Paulo, if you live in these more peripheric areas, have the chance to be infected. So as a general, 26.2% of population is positive, being 21.6% in people with higher income and 30.5% in the lower income. Taking into account the seroprevalence of 26.2 and the total number of adults living in Sao Paulo, it's about 8.4 million people, the number of adults that were already infected is 2.2 million. And during this time, between phase 3 and phase 4, approximately 700,000 people were infected. As the rate of seroreversion is relatively low, when you use 2 methods, the estimated seroprevalence obtained in this study reflects probably the true rate of SARS-CoV-2 infection among adults living in Sao Paulo. They produce antibodies that are detectable by at least one of the 2 methods used in this study. The last one, please. I'd like to thank all the people that work in this very complex study, and Professor Beatriz Tess at the Faculty of Medicine of São Paulo University, Dr. Maria Cecilia Goy Porto Alves at the Health Institute in São Paulo, Professor Fernando Reinach, Dr. Garizati, Maria Carolina Pintão, and Marcia Cavallari Nunes, the CEO of the Evolve Intelligence, and also for the funding that was provided by CEMEA, Group of Fleury, Ibope, and All for Health. Thank you, everyone, and I'll be available for you if you have any additional questions. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Celso, for your presentation. We will continue with the presentation from Dr. Gustavo Mendes, General Manager for Drugs and Biologics at the Brazilian Regulatory Agency, ANVISA. I would also like to remind the audience that they can make questions or put the questions in the questions option at the bottom of the screen. So, Gustavo, thank you very much for being with us, and it's your presentation now. I think you're on mute. While we wait for Gustavo to connect with the microphone, can we make some questions to Dr. Fernando Reinach? Fernando,
sure.
Are you connected?
Yes, I'm connected here.
We heard from Celso that you are one of the participants, or maybe the mentor of the idea of this seroepidemiologic study in Sao Paulo. What could you tell us about the importance of this study for the epidemiology of the epidemic in Brazil?
Well, I think this is probably the only or the major serological inquiry that survived in Brazil. When we started that with Celso, just in the beginning of the epidemics, Brazil had bought a lot of these finger prick quick tests. And there was an initial survey across the whole of Brazil using that methodology. And then also in Sao Paulo, in all major cities. And what happened with this test is that for some reason, it really detects very high levels of antibody, but once the antibody lowers a little bit the level in the blood, it does not detect anymore. So a lot of these surveys using these tests or these kits were later shown not to work properly because they show very high levels, and 2 weeks later, the levels in the population drop, which is impossible to happen, you know. And in the beginning, there was a problem that is there a lot of antibody decay or not? But very early on, discussing with Celso said, like, we should use this more sophisticated test that they do at Fleury. And so we started this test only in the city of São Paulo. And then we did all these surveys that Celso showed. And what I think is very important is the fact that we have in October 10th, right, just before that started what's so-called second wave, we had already 26% of the city of Sao Paulo with antibodies. And probably now, if we were to repeat, we'll probably repeat that in January, it will be around 30 or something percent in the whole population. These levels, you don't get complete immunity or herd immunity, but it starts to get difficult for the virus, or more difficult, a little bit more difficult for the virus to spread. And I think the levels in Sao Paulo are very high. And therefore, we should not expect a huge increase in the second wave, or we might have a second wave. You know, there's still majority of the people are not infected, but the spread will be slower, and also the fact that with fewer measures you can reduce the R, you know, because you already have you don't need such a violent intervention to reduce the R. The disease is progressing steadily in Sao Paulo. We didn't have two waves as most of the cities in Europe. We had a wave that started a bit later, and it was a huge wave that didn't go to a huge peak, but we ended up in a few months, for example, in Brazil, where we had 1,000 people dying per day, and now we have 300 people dying per day in Brazil. And this has been a continuous phenomena since probably May, with a slowdown. But basically, the virus is spreading throughout Brazil almost at its own speed. You know, the containment in Brazil is not very effective. And the result is those very high seroprevalences that we have in large cities like Sao Paulo.
Okay, thank you very much. And I have to apologize, I didn't introduce you to the audience. Dr. Fernando Reinach is a full professor of biochemistry at University of Sao Paulo. He's also science writer at the Estado de São Paulo, one of the leading newspapers in Brazil. And he's also one of the most important scholars studying the epidemic here in Brazil. So thank you very much, Fernando, for being with us today. Fernando also accepted to participate in this webinar before we had invited Dr. Paulo Shap. He couldn't be with us, and he was the one that suggested that Fernando joined us, and I was very happy to have him here.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. In soccer, we say you're sitting in the bank, or how to say, in the sidelines, and you are substitutes. But it's a pleasure to be here.
Usually the substitutes are the ones that scored the goals. No?
Not with Paulo Shap. In Brazil, with the question of testing, we have, for people that are not in Brazil and not familiar with what happened here, we started with a very low testing policy, as most countries. We were only testing people once they arrived in the hospital. So the percentage of people tested that were positive was very high. In the beginning, it was like 80%, because you would only test people that were already serious in the hospital. And then that increased, there was an increase in the number of tests, but still in Brazil today, if you look in the global statistics, we are one of the few countries that do not perform random testing in the population. So, for example, in New York, they had this agreement where if the percentage of tests, positive tests became 3%, they would close the schools. I don't know if you remember that. And last week, there was all this discussion about. So in Brazil, since we do not do random PCR tests, basically we don't have a number for the percentage of people that are actively transmitting the virus in the population. Like most people have an estimate, most countries have an estimate for that, but we don't. So basically, what we have are two numbers in Brazil, three numbers. Basically, the number of people that are in the hospital, the number of people that test positive, and that's usually people that already have a lot of symptoms, etc. So they say in Brazil there are around 6 million people infected, but our Soro survey shows that at least in Sao Paulo, there are between 8 and 10 times more people infected in Brazil. So probably in Brazil, we have around 60 million people infected out of a population of 210, if you can extrapolate the numbers from Sao Paulo. So the final result of that is that we have the number of deaths, people that died, the number of people that are in the hospitals, and the number of people that test positive. So the data is very bad in Brazil to follow up what's happening in the country.
Yeah. Well, we have a question already from the audience, and the question from Dr. Chris Cuolo is, Brazil is now moving into summertime, so may we expect the virus to decline, but in Europe, when we move to autumn and winter, the pandemic is gaining strength. Are you taking measures to prevent the new wave, which will come in autumn, as vaccinations have not yet made available to all people? May I direct this to Celso and Fernando? Celso first.
Sorry. Thank you for the question. I think that as Brazil started a little late in the infection, we probably start at the end of our summer in Brazil. Maybe that gave us a little refreshment, because people in summer are more in open spaces. Although they get together in the strands, it's a more ventilated area, so that could be an explanation for what we got a little later in this epidemic compared to the rest of the world, that the northern hemisphere was in winter. So that could be an explanation for that. I surely hope that that can prevent us from having a new wave in Brazil in our summer, because we won't have the time to vaccinate people in significant numbers. As you may know, we are probably going to start vaccinating people in the first trimester of the year, but the numbers in Brazil are huge. So if you are supposed to vaccinate half the population next year, I don't think that we'll have infrastructure to do that, considering the lack of a good logistics we have, the lack of refrigerators and freezers, depending on the vaccine we're going to use. So I think that we may expect a wave in summer, but not that important as we had in our winter, for example. So let's wait and see. The federal government is not doing much effort to avoid that, in my point of view. The measures they are taking are very naive, and I don't think they would get so much success by doing that. What do you think, Fernando?
Yeah, I basically agree with you, and it's very strange that we are entering the summer in Brazil now, and we had an increase in the last month or so in Brazil in the number of cases and the number of deaths. And this is a little bit unexpected, because in the summer, in theory, should go down, but at the same time, the preventive measures went down a lot. You know, we are in what we call the green phase. Almost everything is allowed, provided you wear masks. So it's going up in the last month or so. And it's not clear because in Europe, everybody gathers inside their homes or inside buildings during the winter. In Brazil, everybody gathers in the summer in bars and in the beach, things like that. So it's hard to tell what's happening, but the fact is that the numbers are going up in the last month or so. The state of Sao Paulo just reversed the policies yesterday. So we'll probably have, we went back to the yellow phase where there are restrictions on shopping centers and restaurants, etc. And we'll see what happens.
Okay. Well, I think that we have already Gustavo connected with on the cell phone. Gustavo. Don't worry, I have more questions to Fernando and to Celso. Fernando, in one of your last articles at the Estado de São Paulo, you were discussing about the strategy that Brazil has adopted to collaborate with some vaccine producers and trying to produce locally vaccines, different from other countries that started.
Gustavo, I think we have Gustavo. Gustavo, can you try and talk? I apologize, Eduardo. I just want to make sure we don't lose him.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, finally, yeah. I'm sorry about that, definitely. New platforms, new challenges. So that's why I had this connection problem. Now I'm dealing with my cell phone, so maybe we can go on this way. So thank you for this opportunity to share with you some of the perspectives here in Brazil regarding COVID, drugs, and vaccines. It's been quite a challenge here to deal with as a regulatory agency with this balance between being fast and not waiving any of the technical procedures and the technical requirements needed in order to get products with safe efficacy and quality well established. So I'm going to show you some of the perspectives and the challenges we are facing right now here in Brazil. So next slide, please. So just to give you an overview, the key aspects of the evaluations that we do here regarding medicines and biological products is this four main aspects. So first, we have to understand the efficacy and safety. Second, the technology, good manufacturing practices, and pharmacovigilance. So next one, please. So when we talk about efficacy and safety, we want to understand very perfectly what is the percentage of efficacy. So to do this, we have to be very clear, and the studies that have to be shown to us have to be well established, and we want to know what is the population and how we can be sure that the benefit will overcome the risks that this product is showing us. And mainly, what is the adverse events that it's coming in order to give us the perspective regarding if this balance will be shown. Next one, please. Well, in media, we have seen a lot of the efficacy percentages and efficacy discussions regarding products, especially vaccines. But one of the aspects that we have to be very sure and give us a lot of certainty is the technology. And an example of a vaccine, we want to know what is the expiration date, the storage conditions, and the quality parameters for batch release. So this is one of the aspects that is being very concerning regarding these products, because we know that it's not uncommon that if we have a product that is on a clinical trial, and most of the times it's an experimental product that is manufactured in a pilot scale, and sometimes has specific conditions that is not well established yet. So we want to understand how we can extrapolate this data that is generated from clinical trials to the final manufacturing batches. So comparability studies is what we expect whenever there are changes between the product that is under investigation and the product that will be finally provided to our population. And technology is one of the big part on these changes. Next one, please. Another important aspect is the good manufacturing practices. We know it's not uncommon. We see that products that will come to Brazil are not the products that is investigated during clinical trials. And in the pandemic situation, we know that because of the high demand and because of the global scale of this product, especially when we talk about vaccines, where we expect to have billions of doses to be distributed to different countries, we know that companies may have to contract or subcontract companies in order to provide fast number of doses to population. And it's what we have seen here in Brazil during our discussion is that companies are negotiating with different facilities to do mass production. And we, as regulatory agency, we want to know and we want to be sure that technical operational conditions is okay for the mass production. So that's why we have recently joined PIX, and PIX has been a good opportunity for us to share information regarding good manufacturing practices. But we know that in some cases we don't have any agency to rely on or to share information on technical and operational conditions of those facilities. And we have to know that there is a quality assurance system that guarantees robustness and traceability of information. We want to be sure on this before we approve a facility to show us to provide us a product. Next one, please. And one of the main aspects that we are concerned regarding products for COVID-19 is the pharmacovigilance. Because of this situation, we had to reorganize our scheme and our procedures. So it is very common for us now to see that clinical trials may be done. Phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 can be done not in a sequential way, but can be done in some cases in a concomitant way. And that's why this, of course, will not waive safety and efficacy aspects, but we know that when we go for real-world evidences, real-world use, we may generate real-world evidences that may change the risk-benefit balance we expect for the approval of any products.
Gustavo, we lost your sound.
Balanced, and also we want to be sure that immunity will be followed up, and we will know how long the immunity will last in order for us to give us confidence that the risk benefit will be continuing. Next one, please. So this is just to highlight to you what is the status right now in Brazil. So we have 4 different vaccines under investigation here in Brazil. AstraZeneca vaccine, Sinovac vaccine, Pfizer, and Janssen. Different technologies with different number of people, of Brazilian volunteers involved on this. And what we expect is that these trials follow with GCP parameters, and because of this, we have started a monitoring and a GCP action on those. And we expect them to provide us information as soon as this clinical trial are showing results by interim analysis, or also if the completion of the studies is shown us. Next one, please. So we have also reorganized our procedures, our administrative procedures, and because of this, we have approved, we have changed the timeline for clinical studies approval, and we now have 72 hours to approve a clinical study here in Brazil, and that's what assured us that we had this good response on clinical trials in Brazil. We have more than 40 clinical trials approved here in Brazil for COVID-19, four of vaccines, and others for biological products and synthetic molecules. And for registration of medicines and vaccines, we have up to 60 days in order to give a final consideration on the submission. I have mentioned the rolling submission procedure, but we have established it since the pandemic started. We have changed this, and we have established this rolling submission procedure. And this means that these 4 vaccines had started already sharing with us information regarding the safety, efficacy, quality, and other needed information for registration of products. Next one, please. So other important initiatives and discussions we are having here in Brazil right now are regarding the regulatory convergence. So Brazil, ANVISA was accepted as a regulatory member of ICH in 2016, and in 2019 we have been accepted as a member of the management committee. This means we have now a very tight commitment with the harmonization and internalization of guidances here in Brazil. ICMRA is another international forum that is quite important in the pandemic situation in Brazil, because we are doing every 15 days we are doing meetings, and we are discussing the strategies, sharing concerns, sharing the perspectives and the strategies to face the pandemic situation. And that's why the regulatory convergence was a very important pillar in our strategy. Another important thing I'd like to highlight is this discussion regarding vaccine effectiveness. This is a discussion that was raised because of this, what we are speaking here in Brazil as a vaccine race. I think not only Brazil, but other countries are seeing this vaccine race that we are facing. And because of this, discussions regarding the minimum efficacy parameter for vaccines was raised. Right now, we don't have in Brazil any minimum requirement for percentage of efficacy in for vaccines, but we are internationally harmonized that 50% is a good minimum strategy in order to approve a vaccine, thinking about risk benefit and thinking about health public strategies. Another important thing I would like to highlight is the COVAX facility. COVAX facility was the WHO found that the intention was to gather different countries, providing funds in order to assure the global distribution of vaccines in the country. And Brazil signed this facility, the COVAX facility initiative. And because of this, we are now, as a regulatory agency, part of the assessor team that will evaluate and will give feedback and and give a decision on which vaccine will be distributed among countries through this WHO COVAX way. And another thing I would like to highlight is the emergency use authorization. Right now, we don't have this normative instrument here in Brazil, but regarding the publication of resolutions, resolutions that is the normative instrument here in Brazil. We accept some flexibility from companies in order to submit both vaccine or medicines for registration. This means that we don't have to wait for all the evidence to be part of the dossier in order to require registration in Brazil. We have established the term of commitment, as we call here in Brazil. It is a term that is signed with us in order to show us that additional data will be provided after the approval of registration. So this can be efficacy results, or safety results, or quality aspects results. So right now we understand we don't need the emergency use authorization in order to provide population access to promising products, but this is still under discussion here in ANVISA, and that's why I'd like to highlight this. Next one, please. So just to finish my presentation, I'd like to show you some of the regulatory and administrative advances we have taken. Please, next one. So as I said, this is the normative instruments that we have published in order to make it more flexible, the administrative pathways to get the registration of products. So this is the resolution number 348 of 2020 that was revised by resolution number 415 2020, and also the service guideline number 81 2020, which is the instrument that gives us the possibility to discuss with companies what is the evidence and what is the claim for us to balance risk benefit and decide if we can go on with the registration or not. Next one, please. So the idea was to prioritize and to give us flexibility for the registration evidence, and this is specific for drugs which with claim alleged efficacy claim for indication for COVID, and also for medications that are used for clinical management, life maintenance, or reduction of hospitality or of days in hospitals, in order to release the weight on our health public system. And also for post-approval changes, we can also use the same rationale. And also, if there is the risk of reduction of number of units in our market, we can accept post-approval changes with data to be submitted after the approval from ANVISA, if it's important for our community, for our population, to have this product available in our market. Next one, please. So we have established this committee of experts, as I mentioned, and this committee is multidisciplinary with different people from different departments and different sites on the perspectives on the data that is submitted. And the idea is to do this risk benefit assessment, and also to exchange technical scientific information related to COVID, and also to proceed with the analysis of the clinical trials within 72 hours. And if it's a compassionate use, that is also alternative way of access here in Brazil for products, we can provide answers in 24 hours. Next one, please. So I'm sorry. It's in Spanish. Some part is in Spanish because I've done this presentation also to our colleagues in our Chile and Argentina agencies. So the idea is to change to give us the security and to give us confidence for our experts here in our department to share responsibility, because we know those decisions regarding risk benefit and what we can waive or what we can postpone in order to give us confidence that this will be accepted for our country is really challenging. So that's why this committee is important, to give us different perspective and give us this confidence from our expert for our expert to have the decision. And also one important thing is the transparency. And I understand that this is the way we can deal with this pandemic situation. Transparency is the way that we will give confidence to people that the regulatory agency is doing what is expected from the agency, and avoiding any political interference, and avoiding any situation we may face doubts on why the decision was done this way. So that's why this committee that was established here is also important, to provide transparency. And we are making public all the decisions we are done regarding COVID. This means that any approval or any rejection of applications we will make available in our website. And also, whenever we have a decision on vaccines, we will be very clear in what was the evidences that gave us the rationale for approval, and what are the risks associated with any of this vaccine and any of medicine that we have approved for indication for COVID. Next one, please. So thank you very much. And I'm happy to clarify any doubt we have may raise it from our presentation. Thank you, Eduardo, again for this opportunity.
Gustavo, thank you for being with us. We all know about the challenges that we have faced in Brazil with our government, but I may say that ANVISA is an island of efficiency and of transparency, and the way that ANVISA has worked since the beginning of the pandemic, the way that they changed procedures and faced the challenges that we all have, is mainly the work of Gustavo, changing the way that ANVISA operates. And I think the whole country is very thankful for the work that you have done. And I'm sure that not everybody knows that it's your effort, but we all know that. So we already have a question for you, Gustavo. The clinical trials in Brazil are approved in 72 hours, and this is a very short time. The question is, does this also include the approval time for the ethics committee or not?
No. Yeah, this is a different department. Yeah, actually not a department. This is a different institution, which is the CONEP. CONEP is the institution that is in charge of this ethical approval, but they have even more challenging deadlines. They are working with 48 hours for ethical approval. They are doing very good on this, but this is not ANVISA responsibility. This 72 hours, it is important also to highlight this, it's possible for us because we have worked in a different strategy, discussing with the CROs and the sponsors prior to the formal submission. So the idea is to have aligned all the expectations, aligned all the criteria, all the requirements informally. And to do that, we are open to have meetings as many meetings as needed in order to discuss and align on the expectation. And then with the formal submission, we have 72 hours to give an answer.
Okay. We already have another question. When do you think that we'll have the first vaccine approved in Brazil, Gustavo?
That is a good question, but what is happening is that we are not committing with any data, any date here as a regulatory agency, because we know that there are a lot of challenges, a lot of data to be generated, and regulatory information that have to be shared. So that's why we are not committing with any date. We have seen a lot of people from governments establishing dates for vaccination, but I think that's their role. Their role is to do this, to prepare, of course, to give all the instruments, and we cannot commit with any data because we know that many factors may interfere on the continuity of the studies and of the data to be generated. So that's why I cannot answer this.
I have a question. Can I pose him a question, Eduardo?
Yes, go ahead, Fernando.
Hi, Gustavo. How are you doing? Fernando here. Gustavo, I would like you to comment a little bit. I wrote about this issue of producing the vaccine in Brazil and building the factories and things like that. What's your feeling about that? Is that a faster process? In the long term, having production locally, I think it's a good idea. So no discussion there. But in terms of approval, to build a factory here and start putting into vials or even producing the material here, is that a slower solution or is that a faster solution for the country? In theory. I know you don't have any requests yet for approval, but just to get a feeling.
Well, Fernando, I'm not sure if you're meaning the tech transfer from vaccines that will be are those. Okay, so we know the institute that will receive those vaccines. So we know Institute Butantan and we know Fiocruz, and those technologies that they are intended to produce here in Brazil are not very complicated regarding the expertise they have. Of course, this means a lot of steps and investments and factors that may not be that much technical aspects, but structural aspects. But regarding technology, I don't think that it's much complicated because we're talking about virus vector and inactivated virus. So this is not like a DNA or RNA vaccine. So because of this, I think this shouldn't be very complicated, and I believe that as soon as we get the approval of a vaccine, this should be fast. I believe, I will not say any specific deadline, but I believe in a few months, and from ANVISA to comply with ANVISA requirements, this shouldn't be challenging. Of course, we need a comparability study showing that this will be the efficacy, safety, and quality aspects will be extrapolated to the local manufactured vaccine. But I don't think it should be difficult.
Yeah, I was asking that because I read that you sent people over to China to check out the facilities there, which I understand is routine, but you would have to do here the same thing once the factories are ready, right? So therefore I thought that, you have to build the factories, then you have to call ANVISA, then you have to go there and certify and do the comparability studies. So I had this feeling that it would take longer to manufacture here, the deployment, I mean. But maybe you're right. I think they're very capable. It's a matter of getting themselves organized, I guess.
Not in all cases, Fernando. They should build a specific manufacturing site to do this. They can use what they already have in order to make it faster. But of course, if it is a new facility, this procedure should be done all the way. Our inspection shouldn't last much. One of the inspections started this Monday and should last until Friday. It's 1 week inspection. Of course, to answer all the queries and all the clarification we may raise from the inspection will be a challenge from company. But if they use the same facility they already have, this may be faster.
Okay, thank you.
Gustavo, we have 2 other questions for you. One is, are local clinical trials mandatory for Brazil?
No, it's not. It's not mandatory to do local trials in Brazil. Of course, if there is, if a product is not under investigation here, we will have questions to be answered regarding the possibility of extrapolation of the data generated in another country here. And this is an effort from the sponsor to clarify us and give us confidence that this data can be used to support a claim here in Brazil. Regarding vaccines, we are seeing that we may have questions regarding the way the studies were conducted, good clinical practices, of course, and regarding the strain of the virus or other kind of questions that we have, the answers that have to be generated from sponsor to provide us this confidence that this may be extrapolated, but there is no requirement. No requirement.
Okay, and the other question is, what are the requirements for compassionate use that you say that were also approved very quickly in Brazil?
Compassionate use is a very specific use. So sponsor has to send us information on what is the patient, when and how it's going to be used, and why, of course, why, the reason for the claim. So very few information in order for us to wait if regarding the situation of the pandemic, regarding the situation of the patient, this can be approved. So it's a very specific use. So it's not, we didn't receive it much because there are a lot of cases, and we haven't seen many situations where the sponsor claim to do compassionate use. But it's a fast approval because of this. Is a very not much information to be provided to us, but of course all the responsibility will be in charge of the sponsor and patient and the physician, the prescriber. So that's why we delegate the responsibility, considering that there are no options, and it's a compassionate move to get the patient access to an alternative, a promising alternative.
Thank you. Fernando, don't go away. I have a question for you. Well, we are getting to the end of our webinar, and if anyone has any final questions for Gustavo and Fernando and Celso, please send it right now.
May I ask a question to Gustavo?
Yes, please, Celso. You
Hi,
have
Gustavo.
your
Oh, okay now? No? Good morning, Gustavo. Thank you for your presentation. I'd like to ask you, what is the role of ANVISA when you consider that some of the vaccines, considering the information we have right now, depend on a deep freeze to be effective on the point of application? Does this concerns ANVISA, or it's more like a question of the Ministry of Health?
Thank you for the question, Celso. So the ANVISA evaluation is risk-benefit. So we don't consider any aspect that may interfere on health system and feasibility of vaccination, because we want to understand if the risk is lower than the benefit. So regarding the Ministry of Health, that has concern in the CONITEC, which is an institution here in Brazil that decides if the product can be provided by the government or not. They should consider this cost effectiveness, and because of this, they should raise some concerns regarding this.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have 10 more minutes for our webinar, and I want to call Marco Romano, the president of IFAPP, to give his final words. Marco, thank you for being with us, and please, your words.
Yes. Can you hear me? Yes, probably yes. It is a pleasure to be here. First of all, really, I would like to thank the Brazilian Association of Pharmaceutical Medicine for having accepted by IFAPP and IFAPP Academy this invitation to arrange an very interesting webinar on the COVID pandemics in Brazil, one of the most affected countries in the world. For me, I would like, of course, to thank a lot all speakers, Dr. Granato, Dr. Mendes, and Dr. Reinach, for their presentation, which were very interesting because we have certainly appreciated, understood more about what is happening, what happened in Brazil since last March, what is happening now in terms of epidemiology. It was very interesting what you presented, Dr. Granato, and what has been commented afterwards about vaccine treatments from Dr. Mendes. Of course, in Italy, where I live, we are living the second wave, as you know, and we are waiting for the vaccine. This is why I ask you, when do you expect not to have a vaccine in Brazil? There are a lot of problems, of course, linked to production, distribution, storage of some of the vaccine, and then the administration. So it was really for us, for IFAPP, which is the International Association of Pharmaceutical Physician and Pharmaceutical Medicine, was the first COVID-19 webinar that we arranged with my colleague Domenico Criscuolo, who is also attending this webinar, and with the other colleagues, of course, Honorio, who is the president of IFAPP Academy. We are also planning subsequent webinars next year. The next will be Japan, then we will go probably to the United States, and then to Europe, and so on. So, and it is also a very important example of cooperation between IFAPP and IFAPP Academy from one side, and the National Association of Pharmaceutical Medicine from the other. So I would like to thank Hélio, who I can see now is the president of the Brazilian Association, and that's all. I think it was very interesting. I also read there was a large participation, approximately 100 participants stay in the call till now. Now we are around 89 and 90 at the end, but it was really very, very useful. And I really thank you all for this.
Thank you, Marco, and thank you, Hélio. Thank you for our speakers that so kindly received our request to participate and gave their brilliant presentations. So we end here with the webinar, and we hope that we leave with important information about the epidemic in Brazil. So thank you very much. Have a good day.
Thank you,
everyone.
and have a good day. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye
you,
bye.
everyone. Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye. Bye bye.